On July 22, 2022, at 77 years old, Vince McMahon announced that he was retiring from the WWE after serving as the organization's CEO for roughly 40 years. Under normal circumstances, this would be cause for congratulations to McMahon, who had previously led the organization for decades through ups and downs, had a direct hand in revolutionizing the wrestling industry multiple times throughout his career, and enshrined himself as one of the icons of professional wrestling. However, McMahon didn't just retire because of his advanced age or because of a changing era. In fact, when he made the announcement, he wasn't even the WWE's acting CEO at all. He had stepped down temporarily only days prior because of an investigation launched against him due to claims of infidelity, assault, harassment, and the payout of hush money totaling over $10 million to multiple women over more than a decade. Given the circumstances of his retirement, it seems like a natural question to ask: how will Vince McMahon be remembered?
Publicity, quite frankly, be it good or bad, that we get increases viewership. So a lot of the negative publicity, that we achieve is okay with me.
For decades, McMahon has been in many ways the prominent public face of professional wrestling as an industry, becoming a wrestling star of a sort himself, despite starting out as just a promoter and announcer. He established himself as a stage persona, turning into as much of a celebrity as the wrestlers themselves, serving as a public face for not just the WWE, but professional wrestling as a whole for years. He controlled an entire massive media corporation through countless eras of success and has a net worth of over $2 billion.
You make this kind of money.
Like everybody else, and you go to work. I love what I do. So I never really work.
It's a common thought that it is impossible to gain that much power, influence, or wealth without inevitably ending up mired in controversy and scandal because of either what you had to do in order to get that influence, or due to the sense of being untouchable and invincible granted as a result of having that much power.
I don't think that there's any organization in the world, be it entertainment or be it sport, that can tell you that they are totally drug-free.
While someone can't make blanket statements about the truth of that claim, Vince McMahon certainly seems to fit the bill of a very important and influential figure who has faced controversy from multiple angles during his meteoric rise. You're watching the Steven Strangles channel. You're telling me right now that you love documentaries. Well, why not subscribe? You like documentaries? Subscribe. You like Vince McMahon? Subscribe. You don't like Vince McMahon? Subscribe. Turn on post notifications, and I promise you're gonna dig this video, so leave a like. You're already here. Do it. Let's get back into it. In a way, Vince McMahon was involved in the realm of professional wrestling before he was even born. He was the son of a professional wrestling promoter, Vincent J. McMahon, and even though his father left the family when Vince was only a baby, Vince would meet the man when he was 12 years of age, when his father was in charge of the Capitol Wrestling Corporation. Vince was interested in being a wrestler himself, but was convinced to exclusively follow wrestling promoting by his father instead. His decision to become a wrestling promoter would go on to irreversibly reshape the landscape of pro wrestling and popular culture in the decades to come. After getting his business degree from East Carolina University and working as a traveling salesman for some years, McMahon began his career in the world of wrestling as an in-ring announcer in 1969 for the Worldwide Wrestling Federation's program, All-Star Wrestling. He was given a territory in Maine, and by the 1970s was a prominent face at his father's company, the wrestling promotion business of Capitol Wrestling Corporation.
There was just an instant attraction that my dad felt, and he was just a wonderful, caring, bright man. He wanted me to have a more secure future. He wanted me to be an accountant or an attorney or something like that.
In 1979, he founded his own wrestling company, Titan Sports, and eventually bought his father's company in 1982, shortly before his father passed away.
Recently, as many of you know, just several weeks ago passed away. But if ever there was one individual who carried the banner of Madison Square Garden, no one quite did it like my dad.
This also put him in effective control of the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, the company that would eventually become the WWE. Now, it's pretty much impossible to deny the advantages that McMahon had for entering the world of pro wrestling promotion, given the fact that his father already owned a prominent company in the space where he would eventually go on to dominate. He got a prominent role in the professional wrestling industry at a very young age. He accompanied his father to wrestling promotion events and got insider looks that weren't available to most others with similar aspirations and ideas. It is, however, equally foolish to deny the monumental success that McMahon has had on wrestling throughout his life, including shortly after his father passed and he was left in control of the WWE. But to understand just how impactful and essential his presence has been to the wrestling industry at large, it's important to understand how wrestling used to work before the era where he took over. There was a time when televised wrestling was controlled by regional promoters that each controlled territories and didn't encroach on one another's turf. All of these individual territories together formed the National Wrestling Alliance, or the NWA, which honored the same world champions and ensured regional harmony among other territories. The only other real player was the American Wrestling Association, or the AWA, which had once itself been an NWA territory that decided to go on its own. The NWA controlled most of the large promotions and allowed different territories to swap wrestlers and stars between them. If a certain territory or new player tried to disrupt the system as it existed, they could be quickly shut out from having NWA events, titles, and fighters, making it difficult for newcomers to gain significant footholds. However, McMahon, with a little help from cable TV, was due to shake the entire industry up with a storm that ensured that the territory system would never be the same. Wrestling promoters use local TV channels to keep the territory system functioning, but the ability to simultaneously broadcast the same shows across the nation more easily changed the landscape.
If something makes itself available, I can fit into that, or nope. And with WWE, we can almost fit into anything of the way we think in terms of the structure we have and the marketing aspect, and especially our talent.
Wrestling fans could now watch certain local wrestling shows that were outside of their local zone, technically violating the territorial agreement, but not in the way that the NWA could take direct action against. But while his father had respected the territory agreement with the NWA, Vince McMahon's purchase of the company from that man and his own willingness to be the maverick disruptor to the existing system meant that cable TV was about to be the perfect tool for the NWA's demise. McMahon directly paid cable channels to run WWF shows across the country, all while slowly siphoning talent from the NWA and AWA. The most famous face that he snagged away from the AWA was, without a doubt, Hulk Hogan, who would go on to become the face of the WWF.
I lived it, man. I did everything. I gave up everything to be a wrestler.
McMahon and the WWF incurred massive debts in order to smoke out the competition in the hopes of becoming the biggest player in town and the hopes of making far more profit in the future. This strategy wasn't invented by McMahon by any means, but it is similar to the ones that almost all disruptor tech companies like Netflix, Amazon, or Uber employ to this day. And if it failed, it could have put the WWF out of business and made McMahon a laughingstock in the industry. But with soon-to-be iconic faces like Rowdy Roddy Piper, Hulk Hogan, and Mr. T at the forefront, the strategy was a massive success.
We're no different than Hollywood or the record business or anything like that, that has its ups and downs. We're the same, but when you look at, the longevity and where we come from and these valleys that on occasion we reach, at the same time when we come back up, we always come back up higher. So the plateau continues to go higher and higher as we go forward.
By the time the first WrestleMania event aired as a pay-per-view event in 1985, it quickly became the largest pay-per-view wrestling event on closed-circuit TV, and the WWF had established itself as the dominant big name in pro wrestling. To the defenders of the old regional territory system who criticized Vince McMahon's shakeup of the entire industry, it was as if the existing territories were like something akin to small, independent mom-and-pop organizations who are being swallowed up into monopolization. To the people who sided with the WWE though, and according to Vince McMahon himself, the existing system was more like outdated medieval fiefdoms or even the mob, stifling newcomers and innovation in favor of supporting old fat cats at the cost of convenience, proper access, and ease of use for the actual fans.
We're concerned with our product. We're mostly concerned with our fans. And I think that we're closer to our fans than any other entertainment company. We listen to them almost on a nightly basis when we're performing. What do they like? What do they dislike?
Regardless of which side of the debate someone landed, they had to admit one thing. McMahon had very quickly become the biggest player in town, and maintaining dominance in the way that the WWE has for decades almost always goes hand in hand with scandals and shady dealings. In 1987, Jesse Ventura waived his royalty rights when signing on as a WWF commentator, after being told that only headlining feature performers were entitled to the royalty payments. In 1991, though, he turned out to be misled after discovering that other non-feature performers had received royalties. In response, Ventura filed a suit for fraud and misappropriation of publicity rights, asking for $2 million in royalties as compensation. The case was moved to federal court, where Ventura ultimately won over $800,000. Ventura and McMahon would go on to have a complicated relationship, with Ventura appearing on WWE programs multiple times, despite McMahon claiming he would never work again.
I said, if I go back and Vince tapes it and sells it, he's got to pay me royalties. He's not going to invite me back and have to pay me royalties. It's that simple. So I probably, you never say never, but I probably will never be at a WrestleMania because it would require them to pay me royalties from federal court.
The Ventura suit on its own would hardly be worth mentioning if it was the only trouble the WWE faced in this era. But the company's trouble during this period weren't over from just a lawsuit. If anything, in retrospect, it seemed more like the first signs of a huge brewing storm. In 1992, on the show Now It Can Be Told, hosted by Geraldo Rivera, Rita Chatterton appeared on the air as an interview subject. Chatterton was the first female referee in the WWE. During the interview, she accused Vince McMahon of coercing her into performing sexual acts in 1986, stating that McMahon had taken advantage of her in his limo. By the time she went public with the information, the statute of limitations had already expired and no charges were filed.
And he took my hand and he kept putting my hand on his penis. He started telling me that he knew I didn't have a job. I had left Frito-Lay because of him. He knew that I had a daughter and that he could either make me or break me. The choice was mine.
Even in the public eye, the story was buried and got little attention, partially because the WWE was already embroiled in multiple other scandals, with the legal trial accusing McMahon of running an underground steroid ring taking up the majority of the attention. In 1991, Dr. George Zahorian was convinced of supplying illegal steroids to wrestlers. Zahorian had worked as a ringside doctor for the WWE, then called the WWF, and it was discovered that he had supplied steroids to WWF wrestlers and to the offices of Titan Sports, a company owned by Vince McMahon.
The world of wrestling that I left and the one that I found, it was bizarre. I mean, it was filled with drugs of all kinds. We're talking about steroids. In fact, this man who pretends like he wasn't aware, why didn't somebody come to me?
But it was 2 years later, in 1993, that McMahon was indicted in federal court as a result of a conspiracy of widespread steroid use in the wrestling industry. He was accused of personally encouraging and conspiring to distribute steroids to WWF wrestlers. However, only one of the wrestlers who took the stand accused McMahon of coercing them into taking the steroids, that being Kevin Wackles, known by his stage name Nails. The defense easily argued that Nails was nothing more than a hostile witness, due to the fact that he and McMahon had previously had contractual disputes, which led to Wackles being fired from the WWF altogether. Additionally, even though George Zahorian had worked as a ringside doctor for the WWF, there were also doubts about if he should hold that position within the company as early as 1989, when Linda McMahon, wife of Vince McMahon and acting CEO of the WWF for the course of the trial, sent out a memo before Zahorian's indictment advising that he not work for the WWF, due to suspicion of illicit steroid distribution. Ultimately, Vince McMahon was acquitted of the charge, but certain testimony that was shared during the trial did some damage to his reputation, and the reputation of the corporation and industry as a whole. Hulk Hogan took the stand and admitted that he had regularly taken steroids, though he had never been encouraged by McMahon. He testified that he and McMahon had even shared the drug as late as the 1980s, harming the family-friendly hero image of both Hogan and the WWE at large.
Steroids are illegal now, and you cannot take them for bodybuilding or muscle development. But basically,
even the stuff that they gave you to help you get well?
That stuff is illegal now, but that stuff that they gave me, if you have a muscle tear or you get injured like running in the Olympics and you have to decide whether you're going to get cut on or do the sports therapy, they are still an option.
This damaged and battered image of legacy wrestlers and the exit of Hulk Hogan from the WWE to rival company World Championship Wrestling kicked off the new generation era of the WWE. Younger talent like Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and The Undertaker were brought to the forefront, with some promotion happening for physically smaller wrestlers, likely due to the desire for the company to distance itself from the steroid scandal. But the era was criticized for outdated and overly silly gimmick characters, with the real well-received personalities like Hart or Michaels having thin competition to sell fights on. Vince McMahon himself was beginning to become a more prominent on-screen presence around the time of 1997, which is when the WWE and pro wrestling as a whole would once again change forever. In the preceding months, Bret Hart, who was the WWE champion at the time, had signed on with rival wrestling company WCW. Before his departure, McMahon wanted Bret Hart to lose the championship title to Shawn Michaels. Hart, however, was reluctant to go along with the idea. In a compromise, the three agreed that the match would end in disqualification, with Hart later forfeiting the title.
I think what I'd like to do is get through today. I think tomorrow I should just go in and do my speech and forfeit the title. I think it allows me a chance to leave with my head up and leave in a nice way. I mean, I don't have to beat Shawn. We could have a schmoz or whatever you want.
In secret, however, McMahon devised a plan to make sure that Bret Hart would lose that title before he went to the rival company. At first, the match played out as planned, with Michael and Hart going back and forth for the championship title, presumably sticking to the plan of moving towards a disqualification. But then, Shawn Michaels put Bret Hart in a sharpshooter. Before Bret Hart even had a chance to submit, even if he obviously wouldn't have submitted, the referee Earl Hebner made a scandalous call. He called for the bell and made Michaels the winner, under orders from Vince McMahon. Hart spit in McMahon's face over the rogue match fixing and later punched him in the face. The event quickly became known as one of the most notorious moments in professional wrestling history, the Montreal Screwjob.
I reached around to grab Shawn's leg, and I could hear someone say, "Ring the bell." That's when I knew it was Vince McMahon. I finally realized that they screwed me. They really screwed me, the lousy bastards.
McMahon and the WWE had actually been at the forefront of playing up the fake nature of wrestling and admitting that the matches were pre-decided. But in this moment, McMahon also gave the wrestling community one of its biggest real non-scripted moments. McMahon faced heavy backlash and lots of criticism from wrestling fans over the decision. Given that the WWE had already faced heavy scandals in the era and struggled against competition from the WCW wrestling promotion, it was clear that there needed to be some change in the public persona of McMahon and of the organization at large. As a result, McMahon decided to utilize his natural showmanship and lean into the criticism, establishing himself for the first time as a character within the WWE, known as Mr. McMahon. He played up his brash cockiness for the screen, walking with his exaggerated swagger and having catchphrases like, "You're fired." The WWE at large also began to feature more profanity and violence, skewing a little older in its demographic. This era and the following years launched the WWE into new heights of fame and popularity, ushering in stars like Stone Cold Steve Austin, Triple H, and The Rock. McMahon had successfully managed to either bury the scandals against him and his wrestling organization, or utilize them as fuel to achieve even greater heights of success. However, this seemingly is not a trick he could manage forever. On July 8th, 2022, less than a month ago at the time of writing this video, the Wall Street Journal dropped a bombshell article. The subject of the article was famed WWE CEO Vince McMahon. The piece detailed allegations of infidelity and misconduct, alleging that McMahon had paid over $10 million in hush money to 4 women in order to secure non-disclosure agreements to prevent them from going public. An investigation by the WWE board was launched after it came out that McMahon had allegedly paid a former employee $3 million to keep an affair quiet.
This morning, we are learning longtime World Wrestling Entertainment leader Vince McMahon has agreed to pay 4 women over $12 million over the past 16 years to keep quiet about allegations of sexual misconduct.
According to the allegation, McMahon had hired the woman initially with the yearly salary of $100,000, but promptly doubled it to $200,000 upon starting an affair with her. The allegation also stated that the employee had been handed off like a toy to John Laurinaitis, the head of talent relations at the WWE at the time. The Wall Street Journal reported that the WWE board was also investigating a $1.5 million non-disclosure agreement between the former employee and Laurinaitis. Another one of the investigations in the piece described an encounter a former wrestler had with Vince McMahon where she was forced to perform oral sex on McMahon and was supposedly demoted from her position and did not have her contract renewed when she resisted any further coercion.
I have pledged my complete cooperation to the investigation by the special committee, McMahon said in a statement, and I have also pledged to accept the findings and outcome of the investigation, whatever they are.
There were also allegations of a woman being paid $1 million to not go public with unsolicited nude photos she received from McMahon. As a result of these accusations, more attention was also called to the 1992 coercion allegation put forth against McMahon by referee Rita Chatterton, a claim that had fallen on deaf ears at the time. In light of the scandal, in June of 2022, McMahon announced that he was stepping down as CEO for the duration of the investigation to allow his daughter, Stephanie McMahon, to serve as the interim CEO. During this time, though, he did retain his responsibilities and control over the WWE's creative side, and even made public appearances on WWE programming. However, just over a month later, McMahon announced his retirement from the WWE altogether. Given the fact that his daughter and Nick Khan will be serving as co-CEOs, it is at this point unclear to what degree McMahon will still be able to control the WWE despite his giving up of the CEO title.
WWE founder Vince McMahon has stepped away from wrestling as the board of the company investigates a $3 million payment made to a former employee with whom he allegedly had an affair.
So how will McMahon be remembered? Has the legacy been tainted due to the circumstances of the end of his career as WWE CEO? And if so, what does that mean for the image of the WWE and even pro wrestling as a whole, given how central McMahon has been to the industry as a whole? It's obviously too early to make a definitive statement about these questions, but one thing is for certain. Vince McMahon was the most influential and powerful man in professional wrestling for decades. He transformed it, arguably often for the better depending on who you ask, and proudly stamped his face on the changes. This meant fame and glory for him then, yes, but it also means that any harm that comes to his image also affects the entire company and serves as a reminder of the double-edged sword of fame, power, and consolidating so much influence to just one person.